Hello chess fans! Today I want to show another game from a recent tournament I played. So this was against an FM, and not only that, a player who recently became FM, so definitely a very strong player. So my opponent started off with d4, and I went for d6. I knew my opponent was an e4 player, so I figured, okay, they're going to go e4 here. This makes my prep a little bit easier if I go d6. Now I went knight f6, knight c3, and now g6. So I went for the Pirc again. And I think typically what my opponent does here against the Pirc is they usually play either bishop e2 and h4, or they go for knight f3 and bishop e2 and just keep it casual. But here my opponent went for this move h3, and so immediately I knew something was up, and I knew they had likely prepared, but I had not really looked at h3 in a while, so I decided to just continue normally with bishop g7. Here they went g4. And in this position, I sort of got flashbacks to when I previously looked at this line, and I actually recommended this line to a student. And so I do remember the main line here is to go for castles, bishop g2, and e5. And after knight g2, there was several moves. For example, e takes here or knight c6. Both of those are playable. And I knew both these moves. And I saw this position. I've seen this position before. But generally, I thought my opponent was also very comfortable in this type of position. They, for example, when we play e4, e5, they often go for this knight c3, g3 setup. And that's something I've seen them play many times. And I knew that they're familiar with the ideas to go f4 and to push pawns on the queen side. And so I thought they might be comfortable. And for example, a sample line might go like e takes here, rook e8, something like this, and then knight c5 to put more pressure. So I didn't really want to play this type of position. Another thing you could do is go knight c6, and then, for example, do something like this, trade all the pieces, and then go rook e8, and it's unclear, okay, if you castle, do you really have an attack? So that was two ways of doing that. Instead of that, I decided to go for a move that is the second most popular move, but generally probably a mistake. And I went for this move c5. And I actually knew c5 was not the best move, but I thought it was also more common than it was, and I didn't know it was actually so bad as it is according to the engine. So I thought, okay, I'd probably get my opponent out of theory because I don't think it's the most popular move, and we're already playing a pretty unpopular line. Now it turns out my opponent was actually still very much in book, and they immediately went for this move d takes c5, the best move. I went queen e5, and then here my opponent again starts playing the best moves, bishop g2. This is pretty obvious though, I take with the queen. Notice that white can't really do anything like this because then knight e4 puts too much pressure on this pin, and then here white would actually just be losing. So after bishop g2, I went queen takes e5, and here my opponent again played what is the best move, but it's not entirely obvious to me, even still now, why it's the best move. Because, for example, to me, bishop e3 looks very, very natural. And this move is extremely slightly worse than the move my opponent played, knight here. And this was actually, funnily enough, my opponent told me after the game they were following a Hikaru game. So it's absolutely incredible that I played this sideline, and then my opponent even knew that further, and they were still following a game. And so here I castled because, okay, it's the most natural move. You should get your king in the center. And my opponent also castled. So again, they reframed from this bishop e3 move. And now I play knight c6, and after bishop e3, queen a5, we might see some logic to delaying the bishop e3 move. For example, if my opponent went for bishop e3 right away, queen a5, knight g2 here, maybe I have some ideas after like castles to go like knight b7, knight c5. And because my queen had committed to here so early, the c5 square is open. But because they waited so long with the bishop, now the c5 square is not open, and I already committed my knight to c6. That could be a possible reason, but okay, alas, I'm actually not sure why this is the correct course of action, but that may be one of the reasons. And so here my opponent again plays a very, very natural move, taking more space in the center. And so now my opponent has a lot of space, and I unfortunately just have a really bad position because when you don't have a lot of space, usually you have to have some sort of counterplay. So for example, usually in the Sicilian, you have counterplay on the c file and the king is weak on the queen side. But here's my opponent has castled king side, and they look to have really nice pieces here. Bishop's nicely guarding the pawn, can jump in like this. The knight can jump into d5. This knight has squares here and here. This bishop is doing a good job. So all their pieces pretty much make sense. Now none of my pieces are that bad, thankfully. Like this bishop is on this long diagonal. This knight's doing a good job. This knight's doing a decent job. This bishop's undefended. So I decided to put this bishop here just to get it to most active square. And my idea was pretty much to go to c4 and then just trade it off. Because here I have less space. And one thing I would like to do is just trade off a pair of minor pieces so that I can work with my less space. But immediately my opponent played knight d5. And actually, at this point, we are still following a Hikaru Nakamura game. So my opponent knew all the way up to here, and in this very, very unpopular position. But looking at the moves, like all the moves for black were very, very natural. And this is the first point at which I have a decision. So up till now, I've just pretty much developed my pieces, and I took the pawn back. So I mean, all those moves are pretty obvious, but now there's like 10 moves, and this is probably what separates a GM, for example, from a player like myself, is that now a GM would continue to find the best move here. But I decided to go for rook fe8. I thought that, okay, this knight might move in the future. This rook's not doing anything here. I don't really need this to be defended. The bishop is already defending it. And I thought that, okay, this knight might want to go to e5 in the future. For example, if my opponent went f5 right away, I would have gone bishop c4 in here, and I think I'm doing fine here. But after knight d5, they're threatening to go f5, because then if my knight comes in, or I guess they're not even threatening, because I just take and then go knight in. So I mean, maybe that was fine too, but that was one of the ideas basically, is that this knight kind of wants to have the e5 square, or maybe the c4 square in the future, and this rook kind of alleviates the knight from defending the pawn. So here my opponent went knight g3, continuing development. Rook ac8, I have to develop all my pieces, and now my opponent went c3, so blunting the bishop on the diagonal, and it's generally like a solid move. You move your knight from c3, now you want to make sure this bishop doesn't do a great job. And here I really found it difficult to find moves, and I didn't really know what to do. Like, there's no clear obvious plan for black to make. The most obvious thing would be to try to attack this pawn structure with something like b4, b5. I decided to start off with this move knight d7, because I thought, okay, maybe the knight comes to this square first, and now if he ever goes f5, I mean, even my other knight is controlling the e5 square. And here my opponent made a very clever move. So right now my opponent cannot move their queen from defending this, because I have 3 attackers and they have 3 defenders right now. So they need all those defenders. But the second my knight moves, it's no longer attacking d5, so they move the queen to e2. And then e2 is a slightly better square for the queen than it would be on the d file. So that was the first, I thought, clever move. And now here I really should have gone for this move b5. And I sort of just underestimated my counterplay here. So for example, I thought my opponent really didn't have to respond to this at all. For example, king h1 apparently is the best move according to the engine. But it's also just like a normal pass move. Oh, no, sorry, not queen a4. Here, b4, breaking at the pawn chain, c4. And here I really didn't like my position. I thought, okay, my opponent has the Moxie bind, and we've kept all the pieces on the board. So I didn't really understand it. It just seems like a bad position to me. But here, apparently, after knight c5, I have decent play, apparently, with something like queen d8, a5 coming. It's not incredibly obvious to me, but kind of looks like I'm getting attacked. Even still, I don't know if I fully believe the engine here, but okay, this is what I probably should have done for this b4, b5 idea. But instead I went for queen d8, which I definitely agree is a bad move. The idea was pretty much to go knight a5, and also I thought, okay, queen is also defending here even further. But yeah, the main idea was to go knight a5. But yeah, this is again way too slow. Here my queen was also preventing this rook from getting the game, and my opponent plays another clever move. Now that the queen's no longer attacking this pawn, my opponent can get their rook in the game. And so yeah, here my opponent has played pretty much a series of very clever moves, and I have not improved my position significantly. So yeah, I've just been pretty much getting outplayed up to this point. And so I was feeling a little bad, so I went knight a5. I pretty much said A, so I have to say B. And knight a5 is in fact the best move. That was my whole idea. My idea is to go for knight c4, and here my opponent plays a really, really nice move. So my idea pretty much here was, if they play king h1, which is, again, unfortunately king h1 is a good move, but usually I would just play it as a pass move. Here knight c4 is playable, and after bishop c1 I have this move b5. And this was essentially my whole idea, was that now if I play knight c4 and my opponent gets b3 c4 and that same Moxie bind, like with tempo, it would be bad. But here they go b3, I just take here, and then this would just be losing. Or sorry, I guess I take and then take here, and then they would lose this pawn. So instead of that, my opponent, so yeah, to circumvent that, after king h1, knight c4 now here, and now b5 would prevent that. For example, b3 takes, let's say knight b6, now this c3 pawn is hanging. But instead of that, my opponent plays this really clever move, bishop c1. So now if knight c4, now they can go b3, not b4, b3, and then, wherever I go, let's say knight b6, then they go c4. And like here I would just be losing. So I thought bishop c1 was a very, very clever move. And so I still really wanted to go b5. And I was really, really fixated on that idea, and I didn't really see my opponent's ideas. So I went a6, just preparing b5, but at this point is way too slow. And for example, I thought, okay, my opponent could stop my idea, but then I go knight b3. And now here, I think I'm doing well now. I've created so many weaknesses. My queen can come back to e5. The c5 square is really, really nice for my pieces. So yeah, at this point I would have full play. So I was hoping for a move like that. But again, now here my opponent plays another move, which I only saw after I played a6, which is e5. And yeah, this is a very, very nice move. The idea is not necessarily to break in the center, but that My opponent really wants to play f5. The problem with f5 is that e5, my knight gets e5, and then all my pieces make perfect sense. So how do you prevent me from getting my knight to e5? You put my own pawn on e5, and then here my opponent played this really, really nice move, f5. So yeah, at this point, after I played a6, I've seen this whole continuation. Here I had to take, and here rook f8 is actually playable, but during the game I saw some ghost tactic that didn't make me play it, so here I played e6 instead, which is also a fine move. Takes, and my opponent went back. And then here, from this point on, I realized, okay, I'm slightly worse. I'm up a pawn, but it's a double D pawn, and my opponent has the bishop pair, and their pieces are more active. I have all these weaknesses in my position, but there's not really much to do here as black. So the onus is kind of on white to prove their advantage. So I went queen c7, pretty much only move, defending this, getting out of this pin, and defending the pawn even further. My opponent goes knight e4. Again, this is like the most natural move. They're threatening all these types of forks, and the knight wasn't doing anything on g3. Now it's doing something on e4. So here I pretty much only have one move, rook f8. Just get out of the way of the fork, also cover some of the squares. So at this point, okay, both our moves, I'm playing really fast here, and so is my opponent. And both our moves are really, really natural, and it doesn't really look like black is losing. And here my opponent actually makes pretty much their only bad move of the game, and they play this move knight d6. And this maybe was a slight inaccuracy. During the game, I was worried about rook fe1. Apparently, this is also not as good, because I guess I can just go for b5 and go for knight c4 right after. So this was not the right idea either. But I was mainly worried about this because I thought they should keep pieces on the board because they're attacking. But okay, I guess not. Apparently, rook takes f8 was the best. And then if I take with the rook, for example, here they have b4. And after knight here, queen c4. And we'll see something similar in the game. But this is losing for black. But instead of that, after b4, if I went knight c4, for example, looking to keep the knight more active, then on c6, then they have knight c5. Then after knight takes c5 here, and now something is going to fall. So, yeah, that's what they had to do. They just pretty much had to... I guess b4 here. Yeah, b4 is also a good move. But they went knight d6. But now I'm able to trade a pair of rooks with tempo. And again, here I actually also made a really bad move. So I'd recommend pausing the video here and seeing what was the best move. Just calculating yourself. So the best move was apparently rook d8, but this line is just really, really weird. And so I end up playing rook f8 in the game, and this is a pretty much a critical mistake. Like after this point, my position is really, really bad. But instead of that, if I went rook d8, apparently I'm still holding the position somewhat. Bishop g5, bishop f6, guarding this. Takes queen e5, and you'd get to this point in your line and you'd see, okay, my knight's hanging, this pawn's hanging, this knight's hanging, everything's hanging. So you kind of just disregard this. I didn't even look at this line. Like I didn't even really consider this because it just looks pretty stupid. But here apparently queen e7 is doing really well for black. Like it's so hard to see. Let's say white plays a move like bishop g2, black to move and win. Pause your video. Okay, if you didn't see it, it's knight c4, and this is a fork. And if white takes here, we take the rook. So yeah, okay, that's just ridiculous. So then you think, okay, what if he just takes our knight? Then apparently after takes, let's say queen b4 pinning here, knight e8, we can just defend all our weaknesses. Our queen's doing a great job, and the position is plus 0.4, probably a draw. So I'm still getting pressed here, and it's just still very, very difficult. Maybe this is like an engine like 0.4, but okay, again, none of this was obvious whatsoever. So I think incredibly difficult. Rook f8 makes way more sense because, okay, my rook was being attacked. Let's move the rook out of the way onto the open file. And my opponent played b4. Again, I actually did not even see b4. When I played all these moves, even when I played rook f8, like I didn't even see b4 whatsoever. And then it makes so much sense because now after I go back, my opponent goes queen c4. And it's so difficult to defend this. That's why this rook f8 move was so bad because I don't even have knight f8 anymore. And so here I had to defend the pawn in the only way I could, which is go queen b6, attacking the king, and now go knight d8. Notice I can't go knight d8 right away because my queen is pinned. So I had to give a check first, and now go knight d8, defending here. And my opponent goes bishop g2. Another move putting pressure here, but it's sort of a stall move. And here, there's pretty much only one move. My knight is hanging here, so I might as well improve my knight. And my opponent goes bishop g5. So, yeah, here I pretty much had to find... There's pretty much many good moves here for black. I guess there's not many. There's only a few good moves here for black, but the best one is by far h6. Now this gives my king more breathing space, but also pretty much forces my opponent to take here, and after takes, I'm still up a pawn. Granted, it's a very bad pawn, and my knight's really, really passive, but it is defending. and his rook can't really get more active. So it's actually not incredibly clear how white makes progress here. And yeah, I think this would have been a very, very interesting continuation if I went for this. And this is, I think, what my opponent said they were expecting after the game. But okay, I didn't see this position at all. Instead, I went for knight d5, which is just an absolute blunder. Here, my opponent had the move knight c8, and my queen has nowhere good to go. Can't go here, because then, what's the problem with this? Oh yeah, bishop takes d5, and then the queen's hanging. If takes, I'm just down a piece. So pretty much my only move would be queen b5, and now here they could take, and go knight e7. And then here they would be completely winning. Because, for example, if I take, I actually just lose a piece here with the rook being attacked. I move the rook, and then here this is pinned. So that would be losing. So I can't take, I'd have to go here, and then after takes, they pretty much just pick up all the pawns, and yeah, there's no moves here anymore, and white is completely winning. So yeah, I thought that was how the game was going to end. That's all I saw, and I was like, okay, I don't know what to do. But my opponent didn't see that. But they went for pretty much a continuation that looks equally winning, and it is winning, but unfortunately, I guess I had some tricks. So here I went knight f7, blocking the check. I'm not sure why. I thought a very long time about king f7 here, but this is just, yeah, bishop d8, and then knight f7 would be completely winning. For example, takes here, and the queen is now hanging. So yeah, I'm not really sure why I thought about that for so long, but my opponent, I went knight f7 eventually, and now here I went for queen c7. My last chance here was to go queen f2, and the idea was that this no longer works. Something like knight takes b7 doesn't work because I have queen e1. And then after here, I even have this nice move, bishop h6, and I'm actually slightly better here as black because I'm threatening all kinds of mates. And what I went for in the game, queen c7, pretty much allowed my opponent to have that. Now after knight takes b7, I don't have any threats anymore. And yeah, here, what I thought that I had was I thought I had queen c3. And yeah, in this position, I calculated queen c3 a long time, but I saw it loses after queen c5. Takes, for example, here they're threatening knight e6, so I have to get out of that. I have to go king e7 covering that, and now they take here. And then, for example, after, like, let's say e4 or something, here, b5, here, I think I just sort of thought this position was completely losing. Because, okay, if we got rid of the knights, I think the position is probably a draw with best play, but because knights are on the board, it's so impossible to actually do anything here. And so I thought, okay, I'm probably losing this position. So let's not go for that. But then, okay, I had low time here. So I saw, oh, what if I go for e4? Or sorry, after takes. What if I go for e4? Now if he goes queen c5, takes here, knight takes here, I have e3. And now this bishop on g2 is going to be tied down to this pawn for the time being. And this gives me enough time, for example, after king g2, king g6, I thought this gives me enough time to get my king into the game. And now this, I was pretty sure, is a draw. I'm not down 2 pawns. This pawn is keeping at least something tied down, and if he can't bring his king in, or he can't bring his bishop in, because something has to be tied down to the pawn, then I should be drawing. And this is correct. This assessment is correct. It would be drawing. Unfortunately for me, my opponent just moved his knight back, and now I can't even take here. This pawn looks silly, and he's threatening knight e6 with check. So I was like, okay, he's threatening knight e6 with check. I have to move my queen. I really shouldn't have. I should have gone knight f8 guarding this, and then my opponent would have been up 3 pawns. This is the best continuation according to the engine. And then, yeah, we transpose to the same line, except I'm down a tempo. I don't have a king here, and my knight's not on f7. So I've had pretty much 2 terrible moves inserted in that line. So I would be completely losing here. But yeah, instead of that, I went queen e5, which I was like, okay, I'm getting out of knight e6. But then I'm walking into knight d7. So yeah, in this position, I resigned the game. So yeah, I think that was like a very, very nice game by my opponent. Few like key moments there, instructive moments, are that, okay, the first thing that was really strong for my opponent is just memorizing all this. Well, I think my opponent could definitely find these moves over the board. I don't think anything was particularly difficult, and they might have even found these over the board. I think knowing this position up to this was really good for my opponent in terms of prep. The next thing that happened is that, the mistake that I made was that I was just way too passive here. Here I need to immediately go for active ideas. I need to have sort of a plan that is not extremely slow and that allows my opponent to go for their plan. And my opponent, to their credit, did a great job here. Did a really great job here, just punishing all my moves with queen e2, and then rook d1, punishing my a5 move, and then bishop c1, very, very nice move. These 3 moves, I think, were extremely nice by my opponent. Then when I played a6, they finally struck. Makes perfect sense. And maybe the nail in the coffin was, yeah, finding this nice b4, knight c6, and then this whole idea. And then, okay, here maybe they could have finished me off very aesthetically with knight c8, but okay. we're both human. And then yeah, they played very nice here to get to this position, and eventually I cracked under the pressure. So yeah, I think a very good game, a lot to learn from, and hopefully I think I'll be playing this opponent again soon. So yeah, that's in today's video, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one, and hopefully you can like and subscribe.